All right, everybody. John Crable here. I'm going to be joined by Audra McIntosh here in a second, and we're going to wind down this series of Small Business Innovation Happy Hour. We've been going since mid-March on a weekly topic of your choosing sometimes, and really going deep on how we can make decisions not only better for right now in the present, but are also going to position our small businesses well coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that trade-off of present versus deferred enjoyment and making sure we're going to be a stable, profitable company in the future. So that has included anything from inventory management to finding new customers to digital marketing, a lot of different areas. But one of the things that we've really found interesting and exciting from our perspective is that we've had the opportunity to interview small business owners that are going through it right now and can kind of detail what their thought process is from every industry imaginable. So today I'd like to have Audra introduce our two guests and get us started off here on the right foot.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it. It has been a wild and fun ride with the different people that we've had a part of the program. So really appreciate that. So today I'm very excited to introduce Lesli and Rico Rice, owners of Rice Education Consulting. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit about what their company does and what they do, but we have them on today to talk really focused around their life motto, which I love. And so we'll have them share that with everybody and how that relates to, home, work, and community for them, and just have a great conversation on their business. So Lesli and Rico, let me put it to you, and I can have one of you start. Why don't I have Rico, you want to jump off and introduce yourself and your company, and Lesli.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Rico Rice. I am the president of Redcon, Rice Education Consulting. We're a strategic consulting firm based here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We provide coaching, training, and strategic planning to organizations that help them to develop their two most important assets, their people and their culture. A lot of this work is focused in the areas of diversity and inclusion and talent and community engagement. I'm joined by my business partner and my wife, Lesli.
Yeah, I'm Lesli Rice. I'm the lead strategist for Redcon. So I do a lot of the behind the scenes work, but I do most of the strategic planning facilitations as well. So leading these organizations to where they want to be.
That's awesome. Maybe you can just share with us a little bit about, tell us how you guys met. I mean, I think it's a great way to start the story on, like, how'd you meet? When did you get married? And when did you start this business? So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'll start, then we'll jump to the business stuff. So we met almost 20 years ago at a college party. And, Rico was still in college. I was a year and a half or so removed from college. So yes, I'm a little bit older than him. And so we met there and, continued our talking and things like that. And then he graduated from college, and then we continued moving on into the next step. So I'll let Rico talk a little bit about how the business came about, because obviously, that's a big part of how we got here today and how we became business partners. So I'll let him talk about where the business started, then obviously we'll loop back in on those pieces about where we met and how. So,
great.
Yeah, so as Lesli mentioned, I was in college when we met after graduating from Miami University. I did a half year as a building sub, and in the middle of that time as a building sub, I was promoted to being a first grade teacher. And although I realized I love kids and I love the whole education part, I realized quickly that I was not built to be a teacher. So I went back to school that following, fall, to be a school counselor. And I worked as a school counselor over the next couple of years. And one of the things I learned as a school counselor, it came to me, is that a lot of times teachers would come to me with issues with students, and they would pass it off as disciplinary or disrespect issues. And really what I found there was a cultural disconnect. So I started to develop workshops for my teachers to understand the cultural disconnect and understanding the students and some of the background from those students. And then 2 years, well, actually maybe 2.5 years into my tenure as a school counselor, the school, I was working at a charter school, and they decided to go different ways with their board. And I chose to go with the board. That school ended up closing because of mismanagement of funds, and it left a real bad taste in my mouth as far as ever working with someone for someone in that way again, to where someone else's decisions could affect my financial freedom. Leslie and I had already started a family, and it was just way too much for me. So then I said, okay, I'm going to try this on my own. And so at that time, I started Rice Education Consulting, really just trying to help use my skills as a school counselor to help young people get into college. It really had nothing to, and also to talk a little bit about some of those key learners I had from being a school counselor and the cultural disconnects. Well, as I was doing that, one of the things that I realized is that this is not only germane to the education field, which I knew, it's germane to a lot of different, wherever there's difference in people, these issues manifest. So I began to really just take those skills and those learnings and expand it to different industries. And then from there, we were able to say, okay, it's not just diversity, there's team building pieces to it. And then it's not only just the training, but the support afterwards. And then from there, it's okay, not only just the support, but also developing plans. And then from developing those plans, it's like, okay, we could develop them in the areas of diversity and inclusion. So now why don't we just develop them in all areas of strategy? And then now we are where we are today, to where we're doing all those things. Plus we have our own products in the form of virtual learnings. So that's the long story, how we got to here today.
Could I go back to something you said? You said you quickly realized you didn't want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Is this the being on and being in front of the class for 45 minutes, then having a 5-minute break and then being back on? I don't like that. I don't like, which is part of the grind, hustle, relax mind. I don't like commitment in that way. So I don't like having to do things in that way, with that much structure. So
okay.
As a school counselor, it allowed me to do that, but I was able to set my appointments. I was able to have a little bit more wiggle room than I did as a teacher.
Okay.
And then I had structured lesson plans too.
All right. I'm going to loop back to that question here in maybe 20 minutes or so when we get to a different topic. But I thought it was important to kind of lay that foundation.
Gotcha.
So talk about grind, hustle, relax. Talk about how that started, where that came. I love the motto. I love thinking about it from different aspects. Talk about what that means to you guys, where it came from.
Yeah, Leslie will share where it came. What it means, but it actually just came one day, and one of my good friends was just sent me a text, and he said, "Man, what are you doing right now?" And I just texted back, and I didn't think anything of it. And then like 3 weeks later, I showed Leslie the text, and she was like, "Man, I love that." And that's how it was born. So it was really just a simple text with no meaning, but now it's born into our lifestyle and our motto. Les?
Yeah, so I remember the very first time we commercialized according to my social media pages, okay? So the first time we commercialized Grind, Hustle, Relax, I believe was either in 2015 or 2016. So we were on vacation in our favorite place to be, which is Las Vegas. Time that we had an engagement through Redcon that didn't involve the two of us. So we actually had members of, and it was like, oh my goodness, an epiphany moment of this is the hustle that we've been referring to. So give you a little background. So the grind is actually doing the work. We look at the hustle as creating joy, the fruits of your labor. And so that was doing the work on our behalf. And, we weren't there in person. And here we are still making money for the company, still able to relax and enjoy our vacation. And so to go a little deeper into it, we talk about the grind being very familiar to people, right? We embrace the grind. We understand that it has to happen. You have to put in the work. but it's got to be in balance, and there has to be a plan for what comes after all of this work. There's a reason for the grinding, right? And to us, that reason is the relax. We love to vacation. We do it every chance we get. We have done 36-hour trips before. Because of kids' schedules, and friends were out having a celebration in Las Vegas. And we said, you know what, we're going to leave after this football game and we're just going to come back Sunday night. So we've done 36-hour trips before. That's how much we believe in the relax. So we feel like you shouldn't get stuck in the grind. And then when we move to the hustle, this is where we start to look at some passive income things, ways that we can help the community, ways that we can help other small businesses get to where they need to be, and take all of the things that are in our heart and really help the community and do some philanthropic work. And then obviously the relax is easy. It's self-explanatory. When we talk about the relax, it really is the allocation of your time where you want to spend it. So it's not just vacation. So everyone doesn't like to travel, but the ability to sit and read a book, the ability to sit on your porch and do nothing. So we look at the relax as really the freedom to be able to allocate your time in the places where you want to, versus where you're mandated to do it, which is usually through a job. So that's the background of it, and we live it every day.
What type of structure do you put to the first two so that you can enjoy the third? And I'm just gonna, from my perspective, I don't do well sitting still, right? So how can I put something in place that's going to allow me to actually enjoy that relaxed part of it?
And yeah, John, let me say this, it's not always in balance, right? So it's not like every day is set up with 33, 33, 33, but it's always at the forefront. So when we're grinding or when we're doing these things, it's always, okay, we're doing this, and we know at the end of this project or at the end of this couple of weeks, there's going to be something there to where we can relax and have a great big relax. So it's not always divided equally. But for us, it's always having that thing to look forward to. You know, I'm always putting in those trips or whatever it is that we want to do, and having that on the calendar and planning that just the same way we plan our bills, the same way we plan our projects. It's a priority for us, right? And that's how it allows us to, well, it allows me to really grind, because I know there's an end or a stop in sight to where I can do the things that I want. And so that's kind of, and it's not just relegated to 1 or 2 weeks a year, like when you're, like sometimes when you're working a traditional job. It's like we can establish those times, and that's kind of how we built it in. And then for others, it's having hard stops. So it depends on the person, but the number one piece of it is to make it a priority as the other priorities in your life.
How much flexibility do you allow inside of that? So, and let me just give an example. So let's say that you have this goal for you and Leslie. You're working towards it. You're doing the dirty work so that you can actually take off X amount of time. How do you deal with changing priorities or life just as it comes up, and building that flexibility into what that structure might be?
Yeah, I'll jump in here first. I think for me, I have a small business as well, centered around travel. I don't put nearly the amount of work into it that Rico does into Redcon. But I'm starting to realize that it's something that was born out of a passion, but it doesn't really serve me as well anymore. And so to your question about when do you know, how do you balance it? I think when you start to look at that grind piece and understand, like, what is the next step after this? And do I still enjoy it? Does it still make sense for me? Is it still worth the time that I put in? And so with that business, I've really had some decisions to make lately of, do I keep this going or not? And so when you're asking about that balance piece, I think that's where this application comes in as well. It really makes you take a look and say, I've been working really hard on this and I don't feel like it's getting anywhere. So is it still something I should continue to do?
Well, I've kind of taken us down a different path, but what I would say is it sounds like the difference between busy and productive, right? If you're being busy for busy's sake, who cares? But like if it has some goal towards it, yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think John Wooden is, I think I sometimes misquoted, but it's really don't mistake activity for achievement, right?
Mhm.
I think, and that's really what we, people always say, all right, you've been staying busy. I said, I hope not. I want to be productive, but I definitely don't want to be busy. Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
So when you guys really think about the motto, talk about how it helps you from a growth perspective. I mean, Leslie, you really addressed from a perspective of, evaluating, should you be doing that, but has it really helped you kind of look at areas from that growth perspective? And I know, Rico, you're both have been involved with one way or another with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, which has been great. So I know there was that piece of it for you, but other than that, just the whole grind, hustle, relax, has it really helped you create some level of a framework for the business itself?
Yeah. So for me, yeah, from the business standpoint, I mean, that's where the hustle comes in, right? So getting opportunities, growing your team, getting smart people around you that can manage projects. Also from a financial management piece as well, right? So we're always thinking about how do we create passive streams so that we're not grinding. And so that's a lot of what I mentioned earlier uh, with the online virtual products that we are developing and we have developed in the past. It was with that in mind, right? So having something. So right now, still in our business, 95% of our work is out in front. So engaging, and it's really every time we're there, we're trading FaceTime, and it's really not passive. So as a part of that grind, hustle, relax mentality, we want to create products and create ways that where we can be more passive. So with our online catalog of D&I trainings, if it feels a need for the client, because our top clients are still, well, before it was education entities and police departments, and the reason why we decided to go in that way was because they don't have a lot of time for training because they're actively out doing performing their jobs. But now no one has time for training because of COVID, so it makes it even um, more in need. So that's the business need for it. But from a lifestyle and from a model standpoint, it's making sure that we're not trading time for money or our people on it as much as well, because we don't only try to live by it, but we also try to incorporate it to our team as well. So it definitely drives our innovation in our business. And then also we take proceeds from that to invest in other passive income streams as well, real estate investing, investing in other small businesses as well. So it all plays a part, and it drives most of our decisions.
Yeah, and Rico, I would also add to that too. So our team has expanded and continues to expand to the work. And so we look at the hustle also as helping other people further their dreams. So we have some people that have interest in starting their own consultant firms. And so, we look for ways to partner with them as we develop them through Redcon as well. So it works for people as well as products.
Mm-hmm.
How are you picking your clients nowadays?
How are we doing what? I'm sorry?
How are you picking your clients nowadays?
For the first
And,
couple,
let me back up and I guess give you some what's going on up here is if you are grinding with a client that you really don't want to grind with anymore, then how do you go through a selection process that gets you the clients you want to work with and that you can show growth with?
Leslie, you want to answer this, or you want to?
Yeah, I can. I laughed when you asked that question because Rico and I just had a conversation earlier today about many people have come to us with our focus being in diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of those being the pillars of our company. They say, I want this, I want that, I want to speak out about this. And it's really trying to not just say, yes, we have the expertise to help, but really trying to assess how can we help? And does the client have realistic expectations of what can happen? And are they willing to invest and spend the time? So as it's related to some of the social unrest and the racial unrest and things like that that have happened that really dovetail into the work that we already do, we've had to really put some other processes in place to be able to evaluate it from that standpoint of can we really help this organization? And so I won't say that we have any formalized processes for how to pick clients now, but we have come to the realization that we probably need to have some checkpoints in place to help us with that. in this day and time where we are in two of the most popular spaces now for conversation. We're in the DEI space and we're in the remote and e-learning space. And so you can say we look like geniuses, but we've been working on both of those things for several years now. But now it's come to the forefront and everyone's looking for both of those things. And so we are starting to get lots of calls.
Yeah, and John, I mean, there is a qualifying process that we also use. So when a client comes and asks for virtual training, we send them out a questionnaire, and then it's like a 20 to 25 question questionnaire. So if we don't get that back, we realize they kind of opt out as though they're not really serious. And the same thing with the DEI, if they can't really, I understand that they may not have all the answers, but if they haven't really thought about it, there's no real budget out there and things like that, then we kind of quickly know and it's easier. But for the first time, we're able to be selective. This is the first time where the first 10 years was all about relationships. We've never really advertised because, like I said, we're more of a service-based business. So we've never really advertised. It's been word of mouth and just doing good work and partnerships and things like that. But for the first time over the last year or so, clients are actually calling us and saying, "Hey, I need help." And then when those calls happen, we're asking certain questions.
Yeah, and I will say this is where the motto comes back into play as well. So several years ago, when we first started this company, obviously we were in grind mode. We were just laughing at the amount of some of those early contracts and how excited we got about those and how it's exponentially grown. That is what I would look at as the grind. We couldn't turn down contracts when the company was new, right? You took the contracts, you did the work, you did a great job, whether you were making $2 or $200. And so now I think involving that hustle piece of how do we stop just grinding every day? How do we stop Rico and Lesli being at the forefront of everything that happens in the business? And how do we bring in some other people and other processes and partnerships? And that's where the hustle piece has enabled us to be selective as well.
So I told you maybe 15 minutes ago that I was going to dovetail this back into the conversation. And Rico, you talked about relationships, and that's what caught my ear. So where we started was the focus on connection and being able to build trust, right? And you didn't necessarily want to be a teacher because you didn't want to be on for 45 minutes and then off for 5, and then have to recreate that time after time after time. But when you look at a lot of counselors, that's what they do, right? They build trust with whoever they're talking to so that they can actually help advance that person's cause. So I'm interested in how you now build that trust with your client. They're obviously coming to you. Hopefully they do some self-selection and want to put the time and investment into it. What are those next steps where you can build trust with your clients?
I think for me, it's just doing what I'm saying I'm going to do, right? And constantly engaging them. I don't think I do anything strategically to build trust. I just be myself and I try to incorporate those things that I believe helps, which is follow up. I encourage my team to follow up, make sure you're not assuming anything, you're being frank with, which is kind of odd because a lot of people say I'm speaking these Ricoisms, but when I'm working with clients, I try to be very, very clear and just have them just do what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to have it at this time, make sure you meet your deadlines and it's nothing more than do what you say you're going to do, right? And that's how I've always been able to build trust with clients, and then have others speak on my behalf, which has always been a plus as well.
Lesli,
yeah, I think that's also where go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to ask that same question to you, but I know you have the marketing background, so I was interested in what that background would say.
Yep, that's exactly what I was just going to say. So being the strategist for Redcon, and it drives the team crazy because we're in the middle of a crisis sometimes, and it's like, oh, the client is needing this, and the survey link is bad, and other things like that. And I'm like, okay, what did we learn? How can we not do this next time? How do we improve this next time? And they're like, now is not the time. I'm like, now is the absolute right time to do that. So when we talk about building trust for the client, it's really from that, my marketing background is all in the consumer behavior, right? Understanding what the needs of your client are. And if you can understand those needs to a T, then you can address issues and problems and questions before they even ask them. And so in developing that process and review for Redcon, even when it doesn't feel good and we don't think it's the right time to do it, I would say learning every time. And so what that has done, it has really built some processes into how we evaluate and qualify clients, how we get to our scope of work and our statement of work, and what exactly are the deliverables going to be of this project. That's one of the things that I think we do really good. I tell Rico all the time, I feel like we should win every contract that we pursue, not because I just think we're the best in the world, but because I think we have some processes that really help us understand the client and their needs. And really knowing what the client needs, you should be able to speak to that in every proposal that you send. And so it really, every time we don't get a contract, I'm like, man, we should have gotten that contract, but it just helps us keep pushing. So I would say for me, it's all about how do we learn from each time and answer those questions for the client before they ask them.
And Lesli, I think you bring up a really good point about learning in the middle of of a crisis where you may not be thinking about learning. And I think it sort of encapsulates where we all are right now as small business owners, right? It's like for so many business owners right now, it's like the middle of this crisis. So from that perspective, what would you and Rico both say about like what do you think small businesses should be doing right now in the middle of this, particularly those that are hugely impacted and not making their companies busier, but maybe just creating just chaos with their company? What's your perspective on what would you say to other fellow business owners?
Well, I'll answer it first from a parent perspective, and then I'll make it into a business perspective. But as a parent, I've had to kind of talk to my kids a little bit like, you know what? Everyone's in the same situation. My high school, my sophomore son is like, well, but I'm not going to get to do this. And I'm not going to. And I said, nobody's getting to do that. Nobody is. We're all even keeled. We're all in the same place. And so I don't mean that to say that you should just be okay with status quo and be mediocre, but I say that to say give yourself some grace. We are all trying to work our way through it. And I think as a business, still trying to accomplish those goals you set pre-pandemic is a little bit unfair to you. And it's a little bit unfair to the people that you serve because everyone's world has changed. Literally, the entire world has changed. And there are rarely cases where you can say that. And so from a business owner perspective, give yourself a moment to breathe and say, you know what? I am not going to hold myself to the same standard because the standard no longer exists. Let me figure out what that new one is and let me see how my company can win coming out of this. So I would say first, give yourself some grace and then evaluate where you are right now and how you can win with all the uncertainty. So that's my parent plus business perspective. I don't know if you have something, Rico, but that's what I would say.
Not really. I think it's really hard for me to speak on it because, I just had lunch with a friend, mentor, and he said, man, I'm down 40%. He's in the construction industry. And it's really hard for me to have anything to say because, like, in a certain way, the things that are affecting so many are the things that we do in business. So my experience is different. Business is probably going to be more this year than it was last year because we're in a diversity space, we're in a virtual learning space. Mm-hmm. But I do know that when this first happened, I wanted to send out something and kind of like capitalize on a moment. And I spoke with Lesli. I spoke with one of my good friends who's in PR. They had kind of crafted a message. And it was like, don't change everything until you really know, right? So obviously there's some pivots and there's some flexibility that has to happen. But if you give yourself some grace and you really know that your business is sound, whatever industry that is, don't go too far, right? I understand pivoting, but don't lose the integrity and the fundamentals of your business chasing something that is so uncertain and can't really be duplicated in that way. So that would be my advice. And then from lessons is just, really the fiscal management pieces, right? Do you really have a business? I know one of my colleagues, me and him was having a conversation early on, and it was especially to a lot of small businesses, is, do you have a business or do you have a well-paid hustle, right? And so really, and that's a Stephen Easley. I don't know if I don't want to take his words, but me and him was having a conversation, and it's probably one of the few conversations we've ever had, but that stuck out to me, is just understanding that difference. And so this is a time to really evaluate whether you have a business or a well-paid hustle. And if you have a well-paid hustle, how do you structure that into becoming a business, whether that's from the way it's set up to the product delivery to the partnerships and all those pieces that really make a business a business.
Have you had to pivot at all in the past 6 months, or are you just doubling down on what you already did?
Yeah, we haven't had to pivot much at all. It's that we haven't. I mean, it was just this is, like I said, it's a crazy twist of fate that we're okay with everything that's going on, but we haven't really had to pivot much at all.
And I think it speaks to our ability to look a couple of years ago and say, we've got to get into this space. I don't know if Rico shared this with Audra and John, like during the course of the Goldman Sachs program, but these e-learnings and the online learnings were really born out of one of our clients being police departments, and they wanted some training. But to take all the police officers off the street is not a possibility. And so they would have had to do 3 and 4 different trainings to catch all the shifts and make sure they still had coverage. And so that would have been cost prohibitive. And that's where we started to look at ways that we could offer trainings to groups that had this same issue. And we said, well, we can do it in the e-learning space, and they could just do it when they got off of their shift, or they could do it at home from the comfort of their couch or wherever. And so really the idea of the online and remote pieces were born out of a client need. So thinking about those things and how can we get better and how can we secure these contracts really led us to not having to pivot in this environment.
Yeah, and I think along with that, our goal was just to develop ours at first, but once we invested in technology, we got the people on our team to do it. It was like, okay, we can offer this to other organizations that need to do it as well. And over the past 3 years, we've had more success taking others' organizations' trainings and putting them on a virtual platform or creating virtual trainings for the organization than we've done with ours. So even, if we go back to January when we started the year, the theme of the year was growth from within. So our goal this year was to really develop our own products deeper so that we can distribute them out. So it's just, like I said, just good timing. Well, bad timing, but good timing. I like to use the Charles Dickens phrase. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being instructed to read that book and not reading that book in high school.
Right.
So,
Well, that's probably the only line I remember.
Right, me too. It's the first one. Right?
I'm going to send this link to my old English teacher. I still stay in contact with my old English teacher, Miss Rowland. I'm going to send her the link afterwards, and I'm pretty sure she's going to have something to say. Shout out to Miss Rowland.
So real quick, I know Audra had a question about mottos and bringing them down to the personal level, but I wanted to keep going on this vein of knowing what the customer needs and then building the platforms or building the products to be able to service that need. Have you ever had a client that just, you offer the online trainings and they keep saying, no, we want to do it face-to-face? Or has there ever been that disconnect where you want to work with somebody, but what they say they want is not what they need?
Yeah. So actually both, right? So when we talk about this virtual piece, it was always, we want face-to-face. No one ever wanted the virtual piece pretty much, except for like police officers. Everyone wanted face-to-face pre-COVID, right? And so we were trying to say, no, we can do some virtual pieces, and at least not all the trainings virtual. And when we say virtual, we're not talking about Zoom. We have a product of trainings that you can go on a learning management system and download and track and really go at your own pace to go through the learning. So yes, and then obviously when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, everyone sees the symptoms, right? Everyone sees the unhappiness. Everyone sees the, okay, we had an incident where someone felt this way. But when we're working with organizations, we're saying, okay, yeah, we can do some training, but really what we have to do is really do some evaluation. We really have to do some auditing. We really have to do some planning to look at all your different, what we call the 5 Ps, your people, look at your policies, look at your programs, look at your promotions, and look at your practices. So that's always a struggle because obviously there's a lot more time, there's a lot more money involved in that. But so you have the client who says, okay, come in and do a 2-hour training, and you're like, no, these issues of racism or sexism or any of the other issues are as old as our country ourselves. So if you think two hours is going to change it, you're kidding yourself. So we want to do these things, and sometimes the client is like, yeah, sometimes the client is like, no, and then we have to think about what's in our best interest, right? Sometimes we'll, another mentor I said, hey, sometimes you got to give them what they want and hope what you give them puts them on the hook to want more. And other times you're like, if they really don't get it, they're going to evaluate your success on how much change happens. Then that's when you have to walk away, to your comments earlier, John. So we definitely have been in both of those situations.
I think from what you guys see from a client perspective and what people are asking you for now, you're at this very interesting intersection, right, of the e-learning piece based on the pandemic and the diversity and inclusion and all of the, racial strife and things that we're feeling today with what's happening. Where do you hope to see the training and the e-learning go for you and for clients? What would you like to see the clients, people today and companies really embrace based on what you see and what you have to offer and just the year spent in this body of work?
Yeah, so Leslie mentioned this idea of when we started doing the e-learning. So I had no idea what e-learning was. I went out to a conference with 2 goals in mind: one, to learn something about it, and 2, to find somebody that could lead it and develop it moving forward. And I was able to do both. But one of the first things that I learned, or in the first session I went to, is that e-learning is not a substitute for face-to-face learning. It's a supplement, right? So there's still a place for face-to-face learning. There's still a place for the interaction, and there's still a place for the live piece. However, there's a lot of stuff that can be delivered that can make those conversations when they are face-to-face more robust. So I think there's, right now, there's going to this shift to kind of like in 2008 when everybody stopped traveling and they had to start having meetings, and then we get now to where the face-to-face. So I think once everything calms down, there's going to be a face-to-face piece again. And so I think the best approach is having what we call a blended approach, where there's some activities that are done via e-learning, but then there's also the ability to have that discussion and learn from each other and have that human interaction as well. I forgot the second part of your question.
I think what I was asking, like what you hope people, like where you hope clients start to go with this type of training. So you've got the e-learning piece, which is the more of the platform and the delivery mode. And then there's the content, right? So that, you talked about the delivery mode. What about the content? What do you hope clients start to really think about and ask for from your perspective on the diversity and inclusion side of things, and coaching their folks and really that content of training around that.
Okay.
That's maybe a little different than what it was.
Yeah. Leslie, you want to go or you want me to?
Yeah, I would say for me, what I would like clients to start doing or asking is, and maybe it's less about the clients, but maybe something we can do. But I would like to see us really lead the charge on setting the expectation as it relates to DEI. I think to Rico's point about coming into a 1 hour, 2 hour training because we have some issues in here, and thank you very much for doing that. I really want to set the expectation that DEI cannot and will never be successful as the flavor of the month. We don't plan to launch a product. From a marketing background, we don't launch a product in 2 weeks. A product launch takes years to develop. And for some reason, we want a quick fix for DEI. But when we do every other business practice or business operation function, we are looking at a timetable. And so I would like to see clients really requesting and saying, can you lead me through, show me what a 2 or 3 year plan looks like as it relates to addressing DEI issues in our organization. That's what I really would like them to ask, versus them coming and saying, this is what I need. And we never want to be the sage on the stage, but we do also understand that if the expertise was within an organization, it wouldn't be an issue now. And so for, the client to say, this is what I need, it's like, oh no, you need that and so much more. But that's why, we've studied this and we have the expertise. But if I could ask the client to do anything, it would be to just plan for 2 to 3 years for this type of work. That would be where I'd like to see it go.
Well, and I think that goes to your point too about strategy, right? What's the strategy around it? And much like, I mean, even if you think about it as it relates to a marketing functionality, right? You can do things, right?
Yeah.
You can do tactics,
Yep.
but if you aren't building it into an overarching larger strategy,
Agreed.
your chances of having it be really successful in your organization is probably not.
Yeah. And it's disheartening because you
Yep.
get in and do it and they say, see, we tried it and it didn't work. So I'll just give up on it for now. And that's what we don't want to happen, because we have a crop of new leaders coming up every year. They graduate from high school, they graduate from college, and they're coming into these workforces and in the workforce, and they're coming into these organizations, and they really need a place to land where they can flourish. And so that's the only way I see it being able to happen that way.
So how many years has Redcon been around?
Officially since 2009. The first 3 to 4 years, it was a well-paid hustle. Yeah, it was a well-paid hustle. So
tell them about some of the other hustles you had at that time. I think it'll set the stage.
So I was a referee, I was a baseball coach. And I was pushing Redcon, I think, doing maybe 20,000 a year. So, yeah, it's come a long way.
Okay, so I'm glad that I have that background, because it's going to frame my next question, and that is when you decided to take Redcon seriously, right? What was the biggest challenge at that start? And as you look forward to the next 3 years, what's your biggest challenge now?
Oh, so let me rephrase it. I've always taken it serious. So since 2009, I haven't had another full-time job. So it's always been serious. It's just having to build it and having to do the grind work. So it was never a side hustle. It just wasn't a very, very good paying. It was a well-paying hustle, but it wasn't that. So it's always been number one since I started. The second part of the question was,
what was the biggest challenge when you started, and what's the biggest challenge as you're going forward from here?
Okay, so the biggest challenge as I started was not having any reference. So what I found out is people always want to know what you've done. So when I can say I've worked with these companies, or I can get a letter from this person and submit it with my proposal to an organization, it makes it a lot easier, right? We're already on second or third base as opposed to first base. So that's the biggest thing that I had to overcome, is just getting a body of work to be able to sell to that body of work and show what we've done. Moving forward is this, really is finding some products and just staying. I think it's always the motivation piece, staying motivated, keeping everyone around me motivated. And typically we're a small team, and when I say small, we have about 12 core members. But the next step for us is really a lot of those 12 members are contractors. And the next big step is really hiring more individuals on full time. And that's kind of the scary part to me, because if you remember, I got into this business because of somebody's mismanagement of funds. And so now changing roles where I'm that person, where I'm responsible for somebody's well-being, You know, I don't have too many fears outside of deer and fire, but that's a fear. You know, right now, I'm loved as Rico because those people I'm working with, I'm the person that's providing them a lot of extra money, right? But at the other, if it comes to where they're working for me, then I may not be that Rico, and I don't know if I want that pressure. So really, that's the biggest key moving forward, and then that goes back to the whole idea of grind, hustle, relax, and why we take the profits and those things and put them into some of those passive investments to where it can reduce some of that risk. Yeah.
So the mom in me wants to really know how you instill the grind, hustle, relax into your life personally and with your kids.
Okay, I'll start, Rico. We have kids that are adults, we have teenagers, and then we have, an 8 and a 9-year-old. And so when we look at that, we think of it as our older two kids were born into a very different world than the younger two. We were still grinding very much as the older two kids, were coming up. And so we gave them lots of time. We didn't have necessarily all the money that we have now. And now these younger two kids, they get all the experiences and other things like that. I mean, the older two had some experiences, but they were pretty, I guess, tame compared to what these younger two have a very skewed sense of the world. The world is theirs. Whatever they want, they can have it. And, I don't mean that in a materialistic way. I mean that in a, can I have this? Can I do this? And I think I can do anything in the world. And those younger two, they were just born into it because that's the mode we were in at that time. We were Rico was no longer just an employee. He was a business owner. And so they got to see all those aspects. I think I'll always be an employee. I'm an entrepreneur, as I say. I need the stability of the regular paycheck. My anxiety cannot handle the entrepreneurial life full time. But with that said, they get a balance of both and they see that. And so that's one of the ways instilling and the kids enjoy the relax as well. We give them jobs around the business as well. They love to stamp the checks. They love to, add them up and, we give them little tasks. So that's one of the ways that we keep them ingrained in the business there.
Yeah. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't put this circle behind around grind, hustle, relax. And a lot of the ability comes from having great grandparents, right?
Yeah.
And having that family structure. So my mom lives with me. Leslie's parents lives 5 minutes away from her. And so her mom is very instrumental keeping the kids alive, letting us move when we have to go out of town and stuff. My mom's always willing to help out. So I think that's a very big part of our ability to move the way we like to move as business owners, as parents. And I think from instilling it in our kids, I think they all see it, but they all take different things away from them. And as Leslie mentioned, there's like they're all siblings, but there's two distinct sets of kids, right? So there's the older kids and then there are younger kids. And as we evolve as people, as parents, with the older kids, we told them what to do. With the younger kids, we typically show them what to do. So that's the big difference. I mean, our oldest daughter, she sees everything and she can relate it, but we're still getting all the way to the grind part, but she's going to be great. My son's a little bit better at it, but he still needs work. And I think the younger two is just something in them where they're already there. And that's no fault of the older kids. We just told them, right? Instead of, hey, this is why you should save money, we said, hey, save this money. So just that whole learning piece. But yeah, our kids are great.
Rhea, you look like you want to say something.
I did want to ask a question, and this is kind of sort of the elephant in the room, as I always call it. You all have the added layer of being a couple and trying to run and support a business. So with that it could have a tendency to be 24 hours. And so how do you all manage the conflict and then the downtime? Because or is there no downtime? Are you just living and breathing 24/7?
No, that's the last part of the Grindhouse to Relax, the trilogy. So definitely the relax. We believe in it. So we do believe in a disconnect. Now, sometimes we do take the business conversations on our walks or during dinner and other places where we should be a couple. Managing conflict, we get it out. Sometimes on the phone with our other consultants in the same way that you might have banter with a colleague in a meeting about difference in opinion. So we don't shy away from it. And I think that's powerful as well for our, team to see that we don't always agree on everything, but we can work through it. So yes, it does come up. Sometimes it's like, but I think we do a pretty decent job of compartmentalizing. It's like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you about this project I'm working on at 10 p.m., even though I do. But I do try to be conscious of it. So I don't know, Rico, if you have anything else to add, but we embrace it though, Rhea. We embrace it and go with it, the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think there's conflict both, but they don't spill over to each other, right? So the work conflicts don't spill over to the personal, or the personal conflicts don't spill over to the work.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to paint the picture that we don't have conflicts. We don't, but it's not like, okay, I'm mad at you about how you're parenting, so I'm not going to do this good work. Or, I mean, she's talking about the other day, we're 15 minutes before Zoom and we're trying to figure out, and we're going at it about the Zoom thing, and the other consultants there like, you guys, her eyes are open, and then it's like, all right, but then afterwards it wasn't like, hey, you want to go get some lunch? So we just don't allow those two things to spill over, but they absolutely arise in both places.
And I think to your point about our consultant being on the phone, she also offered at the end, like, yeah, you were wrong and you were wrong. You both just weren't listening. And so I think also our team has that freedom and that comfort to be able to jump in and say, like, yeah, you were wrong. And this is how we do it. So I think it's just really surrounding ourselves with a good environment and a peaceful place, even within conflict. So that was a great question, Freya.
Well, I've worked with other married couples that can't seem to separate that. And when Ron was living, I decided I just couldn't work in his business. That was, if we wanted to stay married, we just couldn't work together.
There have been times, I'll say, that I'm like, I'm just going to get off the project. And then I can't.
But,
I always do that.
Yeah, for the most part, we understand it. And then we've always been able to have mine, hers, and ours, right? Yeah. From everything. So there's always been that, whether good or bad, that compartmentalization. Okay, this is yours. Even now, like, this is your project. This is my project. No, this is your money. This is my money. This is our money. Yeah. And then so that's been at the foundation. People that tune in and say that's probably because of you, Rico, and because of how frugal I am. But it's work though.
So I think the question becomes: was it intentional or did it evolve?
What part?
Your ability to be able to separate and do, what's yours, mine, and ours. Did you guys go at it like that, or did it just gradually evolve into that at a certain point? Because
I think we're both pretty individual people. We're pretty headstrong. We're pretty individual, and I think early on in our relationship, we understood those places where it was like, oh, okay, we can agree to disagree on this thing and then go in. But when it comes to money, Rico, and anyone that knows him will tell you that he's always going to play it to that perspective of, I'll never put things in the control of someone else that I depend on. And you could take that to money and everything else that he does. And so I think it's just a principle that he has that worked for me too. So we just rolled with it. But there was always that ours pot too. And that mostly, I will say, in all honesty, that started off as a travel fund. That was the ours part. Everything else was separate, but we established a travel fund early on in our relationship, and we just put money in it, and this is what we're using when we travel. So it's always been a core part of who we are in that piece. So.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question to wrap us up here today, but I would also just point out too is, Audra asked a question about kids, right? And how does that work in family? And Rhea, you asked a question about how do partners work together in personal and professional, and it's a great example for your kids too, right? I mean, when they can see that.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. Yeah, but they got to see both sides of it, right?
I was going to say, they're like.
They have to see both sides of it so that they know when you are in a conflict, you can come out on the other side and not have hit your brother or, whatever.
Right.
And I'm just
I'm
speaking from
slamming doors.
personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap us up here, and again, we appreciate your time and we want to be respectful of that. Any last advice that you would give to a small business as they're in the midst of the storm now, but definitely wanting to make it out of this and to the other side?
Yeah. I think mine would be to just really take the motto and grind. This is grind time. This is time to put your head down. And in some cases, pedal as hard as you can to stay above water. Keep your head above water from the business standpoint, but make sure you're looking at how do I take that and move it to that next phase. So, because sometimes I think what's happening now in this tough time of the pandemic is we're starting to realize some of those things that we've held on to too long. And the pandemic has just brought it to light and said, I can no longer maintain this. So in a way, this has been a cleansing process for individuals and businesses. At least personally for me, that's what it's been. Some things I just have to let go. And so I think that would be my advice to a business. Do what you can to stay afloat, but really evaluate, what do I still need to keep moving and grow and come out of this? Because if you come out of this on the other end, you're going to be okay. I mean, that's how I feel about it. So that would be my advice. Figure out what you can let go to keep your head above water if necessary, and grind it out.
Yeah, and I think everything that Leslie said, and then also leveraging the resources, right? I think
Yes.
when this thing first started, I didn't really appreciate the different resources, whether there's the financial resources, whether that's a lot of people that didn't have time has time now, right? I just seen where one of my best friends, he sent me an email that he had emailed the CEO, and the CEO responded back, and then another one of our consultants, her friend had reached out to her that she had emailed the CEO after this whole diversity racial issue happened, and the CEO emailed her back and asked her what she thought. And then she freaked out, like, I didn't think he was going to email me back. So really using this time to leverage your resources and have those conversations, or at least reach out to have those conversations to see where you can learn from, I think is a very big piece of it. And then, like Leslie said, really trying to take this time to learn and trim where you can, but also to grow where you can, right? Is there something that you can do? Is there another service line that you hadn't thought about or didn't need to think about in the past that you can now add, right? A lot of just looking at what the needs are now. There's still needs. Companies still have needs, and how do you fill those needs? I mean, we saw it with the big companies, with the motor companies. My best friend works at one of the Virgin companies, and they had all the technology, so they started doing the respirators, and Ford did that. So looking at where you have the infrastructure and trying to come up with new products to solve the current needs.
All right, wonderful. So to Rico and Leslie, thank you for joining us here today. And really, it's been a fun conversation. I mean, they're all fun, but I really appreciate the back and forth and the variety of opinions. And to Audra and Rhea as well, I always appreciate you being on these calls and leading them and asking some really great questions. So thank you very, very much for your time, everybody. And we'll talk again here soon.
Thank you. I had a great time. Have a good one. Bye.